So this is from Etym Online. Okay, so this is from Etym Online, Etymology Online, but etymonline.com, etymological dictionary online. So that's what I was reading from. It said, people of common descent, 1560s, people descended from a common ancestor class of persons, allied by common ancestry from the French race, earlier raza, race, breed, or lineage, possibly from Italian raza, which is of unknown origin, cognate with Spanish raza, Portuguese raza, and so forth. And they said, etymologists say it had no connection to Latin radix, meaning root, though they admit this might have influenced the tribe nation since. And they say Klein suggests, they don't know, but they suggest the words derived from Arabic ras, head, beginning origin, compare Hebrew rush. So the first thing that we showed was, you look at the Hebrew term rush, and it means head or leader, and that becomes ras in Arabic, but it's ras in, like ras Makonnen in Ethiopia, or ras Tafari, governor Tafari, and so forth. So Rasha or Rusha in ancient Kemet, with the determinative of the side view of the head, with the beard right here, means the peak, the tip, the head, the top, the summit. It also means chief, governor. So by the time you get to Arabic, and they're saying ras means head or leader, and you get to Hebrew, rush means head or leader, and in Amharic, ras or raisi means head or leader or governor or chief or the top. You can go back to ancient Khanate Kemet in the Medusa, and we already have it. So there's no Hebrew origin or Arabic origin. That's nonsense. Now, they said Latin radix, meaning root. They say it may have influenced the notion of tribe and nation and so forth. So let's look at the term root. The term radix, meaning root in Latin, the Proto-Indo-European root for that term is rad, W-R-A-D, meaning branch or root. And it says it forms all or part of things like eradicate, radical, radicant, radish, and so forth, all of them. It is a hypothetical source of evidence for its existence provided by the Greek, and let's just expand that a little bit. It is the hypothetical source of evidence for its existence provided by Greek, ritza, root, Greek, branch, Latin, radis, root or radish, coming from radix or radix, and so forth. Gothic, Old English wort, and then Old Irish friend, root, and so forth. But the W-R-A-D, rad, the origin of the term root or branch, when you look in ancient Kemet, in the old dictionaries, the T with the dot under it is how they transliterate the hand with the open palm. The T with the dot under it is not pronounced as a T, it's the T sound, but it's the D sound. So this is not rutu, it's rudu, 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 and rudu means healthy growing plants, shoots of a plant. So rudu is the origin of the term root, and then rudu becomes radu or rad in Proto-Indo-European, and that's the origin of the term branch or root. So they don't know the origins, but both of those terms, whether it's ras, meaning head, or rasha, or rosh, and so forth, meaning head or leader, meaning the beginning and so forth, those terms they don't understand and are sure they're suggesting, giving recommendations, but those terms come from ancient Khanate Kemet, which they don't share here. And then rad, meaning root, comes from rudu in ancient Kemet, meaning the same thing, which of course they don't share that here either. Most of these books on etymological origins, they'll go to the Proto-Indo-European root when they say Latin or Greek or Proto-Germanic or, Tocharian and things like that. They'll get to the Proto-Indo-European root and say, well, the Proto-Indo-European root gave birth to the various French and Germanic and Spanish and Portuguese and Sanskrit and everything else. But everything goes back to that Proto-Indo-European root a few thousand years ago. But they will not tell you typically that the Proto-Indo-European root And they'll say that Proto-Indo-European is the mother of all the Indo-European from India, when the whites invaded India, all the way across Europe. So Proto-Indo-European, all the way across, they'll say that's the mother language family that gave birth to all of these European languages that exist today, including Sanskrit and Indian. But what they won't tell you is that the roots of the terms in this Proto-Indo-European language family or phylum come from ancient Afuraitkaitnut before Europeans existed on Earth. Meaning when we migrated into Southern Europe from North Afuraitkaitnut over 40,000 years ago, there were no Europeans, of course. We migrated into Southern Europe and populated Southern Europe and the Near East and Asia, Australia, and eventually North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean, before Europeans and Asians existed on Earth. And we continue to talk, of course. So the root words that you find in the Medutu, the hieroglyphic dictionaries, and the language, you will find that all of the terms in these various languages, French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Sanskrit and Indian and so forth, you will find that they have roots in the language of our ancestresses and ancestors before Europeans existed. Now, so we can just dispose of them talking about Arabic and Hebrew and Latin and so forth. Then you have the other term for race, to rush. Rasen, to rush, from a Scandinavian source akin to the source of race, reinforced by the noun in English and by Old English cognate resan, to rush headlong, hasten into rashly, transitive meaning to run swiftly, to run against the competition of speed. That's a later usage of the term race. Second. And then you have race, now number 3, a strong current of water, more or less particular sense of race, which then denoted any forward movement or swift running from Old Norse ras in its sense of a rushing of water. So a rush of water became known as a race of water later on, the term race deriving from the rush sound, and anything moving swiftly, moving quickly is a rush. And it later became a race. So if someone is racing someone, that means they're moving quickly. So that's a later designation, but the root is the strong current of water. And of course, the root of that is actually the natural sound that emanates from that activity, that event. So when you have the r sound and the sh sound, and when water is moving quickly and you see, river water is moving quickly and so forth, you have a that's just rush. We just replicated the sound that the actual, entity makes as it's functioning in creation. So we simply replicate. Just like in our Akan language, you'll have one of the terms for cat is meow, just like in ancient Kemet, M-A-U, meow is one of the terms for cat. Why is that? We didn't name the cat. That's the sound that organically emanates from that entity in creation when they say meow. So we identify the entity based on the natural sound that emanates from the entity. When you have the ra and the sh sound, the sh sound as water is moving quickly, then we say rush is how we identify that activity. And then race is born out of it. Now, and then there's one more piece. You also have rush, a plant growing in a marshy ground, having leaves that grow as stiff, pithy, or hollow stalks. Middle English, rish, resh, rosh, from the Old English, rest and so forth. Proto-Germanic rust, resg, to plait, to weave, to wind, and so forth. And then it says, the remarkable variations in the vowel of this word make its precise history far from clear. So they're not sure where it comes from, because they're like, the term rush can mean movement of water, but rush is also the term for plants growing in a marshy ground. That's what a rush is. But there are different, vowel placements in different expressions of European languages, and they're not sure why the terms or the sounds res or rush or rash or rush or rush has to do with a plant growing in a marshy ground. Then the stalks were cut and used for various purposes, including making torches and finger rings. They also strewn on floors as covering or when visitors arrived. It was attested a type of something weak or of no value by the 14th century. And if you look at the term bulrush, like a bulrush basket and so forth, popular name for a tall rush-like plants growing in or near water. It says in biblical use, the Egyptian papyrus. A plant growing in a marshy land, that's what a papyrus as well as a lotus is. They are called rushes. Now, so we're already getting, to this definition. As we can see, there's a relationship between race and rush. The rush, any of several flowering plants distinguished by cylindrical stalks or hollow stem-like leaves. They're found in temperate regions and particularly in moist or shady locations. The rush family includes juncus and the common rushes, lucula, and the wood rushes and so forth. So the lotus plant in ancient Kemet is a rush. The papyrus plant, which is the watch plant, the lotus is the nekeb plant and so forth, that is rush. They're both rushes. Now, here's the relationship. And you can also already see that the different sons of Heru with different facial colors and so forth are born of the rush. They come up out of the rush or the race. Now, this is the little plant. This is the plant of the south. It's called the resut plant. The resut, the plant of the south. This resut, which is plural. Res is singular. Resut is plural, but the res plant, they say reeds here, and it's a bundle of them right here. That is the origin of the term. Res is the origin of the term rus or rush. The rushes that grow up out of the, marsh-like conditions and so forth. That's the origin of the term rush, res or resut. So you already have that. But the same term rush is also associated with race. Not only a swift moving thing like people racing, but also race in the sense of, a common origin, a common ancestor, people coming from a common ancestor and so forth, the lead, the beginning, the root and so forth. So rush and root and people are all associated. The rush plant is resut, the people and, the origins are all associated. So we already have rush, the plant is resut. We already showed that the term head, leader, chief and peak and governor and so forth is Rasha in H. Kemet. So we have that rush, and these plants are growing out of that marshy ground and so forth. But it shows the head of the person. Now, what's the association? Res means south, southern Kemet. Just like you have Mehit means north. There's also a term Shema, which means south as well, but you have the term Res that's descriptive of the south. It is spelled with the rush plant or the res plant. Then you have Resi, meaning southern. Res meaning south, Resi meaning southern. In the Coptic dialect, you see this, it looks like a P, but it's really an R. The H is the S sound, and the C is the S sound, as like in cellular. So that is res, as it's pronounced in Coptic. Res meaning south, but what describes the south? The rush or res plant, the root plant. Resi, south or southern. Then you get to the, not just the direction, but the nature of it. Resiu, the southern tribes, the peoples in the south. In ancient Kemet, and then of course you have Resu, meaning reeds. In ancient Kemet, we talk about how the people, the origin of the people came from the south, came from the Resi, it came from the beginning, it came from the root. The root is the nekeb plant of the south, the lotus plant of the south, and so forth. It is a rus or a resh or a race, a res. That's the root plant. So root is res, root is also south, root is also, res is root, res is south, resi are the southern people, resi the people from the beginning, resi or resha are the people, the head people, the ones from the beginning and so forth. It's defining the people from the south who are the root people, the people from the beginning, where the common ancestry begins. Now, as you can see here, as we showed, when you see that plant of the south opening up, you see Alsar sitting on his throne, the divinity. And these are the 4 sons of Heru, which are the grandchildren of Alsar. And these 4 different individuals are coming up out of the southern plant. They're coming up out of the root, the rest, the south, the rush, and so forth. And there are different individuals, just like you can have different plants, different rushes. You have 4 different plants, meaning you have 4 different rushes. These different plants can look different. That means you have 4 different, not rushes, but you have 4 different reses or races. You also have Resu, the god of the south and its vegetation, and Resi, the goddess of the south. So the term Res has to do with those from the beginning, from a common ancestry. The south is ancient Khanit or Nubia. That's the beginning. We began in the beginning and we moved up north. Herodotus talks about how when he was there, the Greek historian and so forth, asking about the origins of Egypt, they said it was the gift of the Nile. They said the northern part of the Kemet was underwater, but because of the flooding of the Nile and so forth, they would deposit black silt along the banks of the river every year. And eventually the delta of ancient Kemet was filled in with black silt and so forth and became a northern land that people could inhabit. That's why they said Egypt was the gift of the Nile. So coming from the south, the land was brought, from the south, from the water, from the rushing water and so forth, from the rushes of the races and so forth, from the race from the south. The land was filled up and then the people migrated and settled in the north. This is the divinity Hapi. He is a twin divinity. He's holding the papyrus plant that represents the north. That's Hapi Met or Hapi of the north. And then you have the spirit that animates the southern branch of the river. That's Hapi Reset or Hop of the south. And he's holding the plant that represents the south. Just to go back up, the reason why we use this image, when you see the plant here, the rest plant, and then you see the wasp, they talk about this is representation of one of the titles of the king and so forth. They'll say Nesubati and so forth, the king of the south and north. But you have the papyrus plant that represents the north, which is the watch plant governed by Wachet. And then you have the Nekeb plant, the plant of the south, that's represented, represented by Nekabet, and that's the plant of the south. That is the lotus plant and so forth. So you have the north and the south. We go back to Hapi. He's holding the plant of the north and the plant of the south. So Hapi of the south, Hapi of the north. And they're holding he's holding two different rushes. The bulrush, the rushes, the papyrus is a rush plant from a marshy ground and so forth. The lotus is a rush plant and so forth. So he's holding two rushes or races. Just like the different plants rise up out of the ground, and rise is also associated with the race and so forth, but they rise up out of the ground. You can have green plants, you can have red plants and so forth. You have different rushes that grow up out of a watery substance. Cosmologically, in ancient Kemet, we say everything was underwater, and the primordial mound that came up out of the, from under the surface of the water to become the first landmass of Earth. Hold on a second. Make sure okay. The primordial mound that came up from under the surface of the water to become the first landmass of Earth. Ptah began to fashion that landmass, and our bodies were fashioned from that, watery landmass. And, we were fashioned and brought up and so forth, just like plants rise up out of that watery substance. And, the lotus plant rises up out of the water and opens up. And as a matter of fact, let's just show a quick representation of that so you can see the cosmology associated with it. Second. And of course, if you have any questions, just let me know in the chat room. Okay, just so you can see this. One of the reasons we talk about this cosmologically, and you see the lotus plant and so forth. I ask the question, does a lotus open and close? Lotus flowers are always raised above the water surface. The lotus flower will open in the morning and the petals will fall later in the day. In Egyptian mythology, the lotus is associated with the sun. This is because they bloom by day and close by night. Now, so let's get back to the document. So the plants are in the primordial water, and the lotus plant opens, the Nekeb plant opens, and they talk about how the sun rises out of the Nekeb plant and so forth, and you see Heru rising up out of the plant and so forth, that energy rising up out of the plant and so forth. In the same context, you see the lotus plant opening, and the four sons of Heru, these different divinities, rise up out of that reed and so forth, that rush. So when we're talking about different plants rising up, and different plants with their different colors have different qualities, they are different rushes or different races that are come up out of the ground, and they receive the energy of the sun. They become empowered by the energy of the sun. They have their own function. They have their own energy. They have their own color. They have their own form and so forth. And the same is true of our people. We came up out of the primordial mound and so forth. We were fashioned by Ptah and given that energy by Sekhmet and so forth. And we were like the different rushes, quote unquote, different races or races, that southern plant, the plant of the south, the root plant, the resu plant, the rest plant, the race plant and so forth. We came up out of the primordial ground. Now, the term Met means the north. It's the northland, the delta of Kemet and so forth, where the water, collects and so forth. But the root of Met means to fill, to be full, to be filled, to be occupied with. The reason why north, Met, comes from the term Met, meaning to be filled, is because number one, we talked about how when the Nile or Hapi River floods, the black silt is carried from the south by the water during the flood and deposited on the banks of the river. And then when the water recedes months later, there's rich black silt along the banks of the river that people can plant their crops and so forth, because it doesn't rain in Kemet hardly ever. So the way people that have their crops and they engage in agriculture, they wait for the flood of the river every year. It floods the country for a number of months. When the waters recede, the black silt has been deposited, and then people can go out and plant their, seeds in that black silt, and then they have abundance. But the other reason why Met, meaning north, is from the root Met, meaning to be filled, is because, as we said earlier, the north was all underwater, and from the south, the land was carried, the black silt, the black land was carried to the north, filled it all in, and now you had a north land that people could live on and so forth. So even the land itself came from the south and, spread out. Just like the people migrated from the south, they came from their roots or their rests, and they came from the south. The rest people, the race people, the root people came from the south and populated the north. Before they came from the south, the land itself came from the south and was distributed and filled up the north. And that's why north is the filled in land. Now that ties to the cosmology. Water races in Kemet from the south, Resi, to fill Mehit, the north. So it rushes from the rest, it rushes forward. That's the relationship between rest, meaning south, and rest or race, meaning to rush forward and so forth. The southern land sends the water that the rest land sends the rushing or racing water to the north to fill it in. And then you can have living beings that come up. Different rushes, different races. You see he's sitting on a lake of water. This is the wavy water line. It fuels and, nourishes the plant and so forth, and then the different races or races. And in this context, we're talking about Afuraitkaitnut people, black people, dark brown people with black undertones, dark brown people with red undertones and so forth, having different colors. Now, let's get into that quickly. You'll see that Kemet means the black land, the black country. Desert is the red land or the red country and so forth. And the people of the black land are the Kemetu, the black people. The Desheru, the red people, that means dark brown people with red undertones, dark brown people with black undertones. So it's both, it's not either or. It's not just, does Kemet mean the black land, or does Kemet mean the black land of the black people? It's both. The strip of land is, along the banks of the river, is black, silt, rich soil. Right outside of that is the red soil, which is the desert and so forth. You have the black land and the red land. Now, hold on one second. Excuse me. So, one thing we want to show real quick. We touched on this in one of our articles. And we'll put the links, and we're going to send you these links as well. When you look at ancient Kemet, and you look at the interplay between the blacks and the reds and so forth, so you see quote unquote black skinned people and quote unquote red skinned people is really dark brown people with red undertones, dark brown people with black undertones. So when you see that interchange between the two, That's not only in ancient Kemet. It's not just Kemet, the Black Country, and Desert, the Red Land. These people here are not from ancient Kemet. These were Nubians, Kanitu, who were visiting ancient Kemet. And you see, you have the brown, black, which they will say the red, black interplay. Meaning in ancient Kanitu, Nubia, the black, red interplay existed as well. Now, that's cosmological. You look at a Maasai woman, from, East Afuraitkaitnut, East Africa, and so forth. That's a Afurakanu or Afuraitkaitnut woman. This is a woman who's a Serer from the region of Senegal and so forth. But if you were just to look at the Maasai woman first, most people say that's a Black woman. Second. Okay, let me go out and go back in because somebody said they didn't see the. Okay, so are you seeing the Maasai sister and the Serer sister now? Okay. I was showing this, the Kanitu, the Nubians who were visiting Kemet. There's a scene from them visiting Kemet and so forth. You see the quote unquote black, red, the blacks and the reds and so forth in ancient Nubia, but it's really the dark brown people with red undertones, dark brown people with black undertones. So it's not just limited to the region of Kemet, where you have Kemetu, black people, Desharu, red people, and so forth. It also exists in ancient Khanid or Nubia. It has to do with the black land and red land. It also has to do with physiologically. We have a black land and a red land internally. Of course, the red land internally is the blood that permeates our entire system and carries oxygen and so forth, all of that. But then we also have another system, that's the circulatory system that carries the blood, but we also have another system that permeates our entire being internally as well as externally, and that is the system of Abatun, which we use that term in Akan, but that's melanin, the black substance within which all of your organs and systems are dwelling, and it facilitates electromagnetic energy and so forth, and nourishing cells and everything else. That's the black land in your body. The circulatory system of the blood is the red land in your body, and both of them nourish you according to their nature. So that interplay between black and red is manifest. Even when you cut yourself, and there's an energetic and cosmological foundation for this, the red energy is fiery. The black energy is more cool and magnetic. When they talk about Set's sacred color is red, and he governs the desert and so forth, the red land and so forth, and Alsar is black, and he governs the fertile land, the black fertile soil and so forth. That's the interplay between red and black, and these are divinities. That fiery energy is expressed through red fiery energy, and the cool energy is expressed through the black color, and that manifests on earth. The same thing happens in your body with the black land and the red. The red land is the blood, and it carries the oxygen, which carries the life force energy, that fiery energy and so forth. So if you cut yourself, the blood is, bright red and so forth because it's oxygenated. But once it begins to lose its oxygen and it begins to dry and so forth, it goes from red to being dried blood, and it turns black. But then if you add some water, which also includes a little bit of oxygen and so forth, it becomes red again. It goes from red to black, back to red. So you have this, and you even have the, black soil and red soil. You cut into the black surface, the black silt, and then up under the black soil, you have that reddish, like the red clay of Georgia and so forth. You have that reddish energy as well, just like you cut your skin, your black skin, and then you have the red coming out and so forth. There's an interplay between the fiery energy manifest through the red and the cool energy manifest through the fertile black silk. And there are male and female deities whose sacred colors are red as well as black. And that's because of the energy complex and the way it manifests. It's cosmological. That's why you have that amongst the people of ancient Khanid, Nubia. as well as Kemet. We also have that in the Akan tradition and the Vodun tradition as well, the blacks and the reds. But before we get to that, so you see a Maasai woman from East Afuraitkaitnut, like Kenya and so forth. People would say that's just a, that's a black woman. You see the Serer sister from Senegal and so forth. You know what's the difference between the two? She's a dark brown woman with red undertones, and she has that reddish tint. Even the Maasai people, they're nomadic, and some of them live in different parts of the desert and so forth. They carried on that set kind of energy. He's the one who governs the desert, and their motifs are governed and dominated by the red color and so forth. So, and you have a number of different tribes that are nomadic, ethnic groups, tribes that are nomadic. They live in the deserts near Kemet and so forth, still today. And the ones who are living in the desert, you see that their major colors within their motifs are red. So, which is associated with the desert. And when we go to Kemet, you'll see the clear distinction when you're driving on a road and you'll see the great, fertile black soil. And then there's a clear line of demarcation between fertile black soil and palm trees and so forth. And then all of a sudden, there's miles of stark desert, the red land. Now you see the Serer sister. She's a dark brown person with black undertones. These are the reds and the blacks. Has nothing to do with blood mixture at all. No different than a black stallion and a chestnut brown horse. So we say we must recognize that the terms Kamal and Desharu, meaning black people and red people, references not only the black country and red country, they reference the black soil and the red land, desert, as well as red clay. They also refer to the skin color of the people based on the spiritual energy that governs them. And we say this fact has been lost to those commentators who are not intimately familiar with and engaged in the practices of Afuraitkaitnut ancestral religion. In our Khan tradition, for example, one of the major divinities is Obri. Obri means black, the black one. Then you have Koko, which is the red divinity. That's Alsar and Set in the Akan tradition and so forth. And when you look at the energy complex of the divinities, they of course match, cosmology of ancient Kemet, but people who are children of the Obri deities and so forth, they're given that terminology. The same thing with the red divinities. The energy that we carry based on specific divinities not only impacts our behavior, the way we operate. A child of a fiery divinity is a fired up individual, a warrior, warrioress, and so forth. Child of a water divinity or earth divinity may be more cool and introspective and laid back, and people who mitigate disputes and so forth. That energy not only manifests in our behavior, it also manifests in our phenotype. That radiant red energy will manifest in the phenotype of the person or that particular group that's governed by that group, that clan that's governed by their major clan divinity is Set, as opposed to somebody whose major clan divinity is Alsar or Mut or a different divinity. So this is something archaeologists, as well as some quote unquote Afrocentric scholars who still imitate, the information. They sometimes just blacken up information that's coming from white scholars. But if you're not practicing ancestral religion, this will totally escape you. You have no idea why red and black are, interplay in that fashion.